My mother-in-law started unloading her luggage right in the middle of our family room. My wife announced, "She's moving in with us permanently. If that's an issue for you, feel free to pack up and go." I answered, "Fine by me." Then I walked out of the house, which was rented solely under my name, ended the rental agreement, and relocated, right as the property owner arrived to remove the unauthorized occupants. Let me begin by noting that I'm not the type to just accept disrespect without pushing back. I'm 32, employed in the financial sector with a solid income. I've been wed to Jessica, 30, for 3 years now. We lease a comfortable 2-bedroom unit in the urban area since we're building up savings for a future home purchase. The rental contract is solely in my name due to Jessica's past credit problems when we first cohabitated. It wasn't anything severe, merely some delayed payments from her university days, but qualifying was simpler using only my earnings and credit rating. She contributes half the monthly rent to me, and we divide the bills for services. Fairly typical arrangement. Jessica's mother, Patricia, is quite a character. At 58, she's been through 2 divorces and carries this victim mentality where every misfortune in her life is blamed on others. She got fired because her supervisor was envious. Her previous landlord tossed her out due to gender bias. She struggles to secure new housing because society discriminates against unmarried females. You see the pattern. Over the last year, Patricia has been drifting between her siblings' home and various acquaintances' sofas. She always spins some tragic tale about why her current spot isn't working out. The sibling has a drinking problem, the friends are exploiting her, her spine aches from the uncomfortable sleeping arrangements. Classic emotional blackmail techniques. Jessica experiences guilt over her mother's circumstances, which I could relate to somewhat. When Patricia required assistance with food or fuel costs, Jessica would transfer her $100 occasionally. I wasn't thrilled about it, but it didn't strain our finances, so I kept quiet. The issues arose when Patricia began subtly suggesting she relocate to our place. Remarks about her isolation, how she yearned for more quality time with Jessica, how appealing our residence appeared. Jessica would divert the conversation, but I sensed she was under pressure. 2 months back, Patricia intensified the emotional manipulation. She began phoning Jessica in tears about resting in her vehicle or lacking funds for meals. Jessica would return home distressed, discussing how terrible she felt for her parent. I proposed we aid Patricia in locating a small studio or shared living setup, but Jessica claimed her mother couldn't manage anything suitable financially. I stated firmly that Patricia joining us wasn't feasible. Our space was limited for just us 2, and I had no desire to cohabitate with my mother-in-law for an extended period. Jessica concurred initially, stating her mother should handle her own affairs as a grown-up. But Patricia persisted. She began appearing at our residence without notice, lingering for meals and then fabricating reasons to extend her visit. Her vehicle wouldn't ignite, or she felt exhausted for the drive, or she'd left an item at her companion's location. Consistently some excuse preventing her departure after visiting hours. Jessica started mentioning how our extra room remained unused most of the time, how it felt self-centered to possess all this area while her mother faced hardships. I recalled to her that the additional space served as my workspace where I handled remote duties 2 days weekly. We'd covered this topic previously. 3 weeks prior, Patricia contacted Jessica in a panic. Claimed her acquaintance had expelled her abruptly with no prior alert and she lacked any alternative shelter. Pleaded to remain with us briefly while sorting out options. Jessica was emotional, imploring if we could assist her mother. Despite my reservations, I consented to a maximum of 3 days. Patricia could use the fold-out sofa in the main area while contacting potential alternatives by week's end. I emphasized this was short-term and she must secure another spot by Saturday. Patricia arrived that night with far more belongings than warranted for a brief stay. Several bags, cartons of possessions, even minor furnishings. When I remarked on the volume of items, she explained she had to transport everything since no other storage was available. The initial warning sign was how rapidly she settled in. She shifted the main room setup, relocated our items to accommodate hers, began preparing meals in our cooking area as if she'd resided there forever. When I noted she should focus on seeking other accommodations, she mentioned she was dialing contacts, but nothing had materialized yet. The third day passed without any indication of Patricia departing. When I inquired about her efforts, she stated the housing market was challenging and she required additional time. Jessica supported her, arguing we couldn't abandon her mother homeless. I reiterated to both that this was meant to be fleeting.By week's conclusion. Patricia had fully dominated the main area. Her garments scattered about, she'd adjusted the furnishings to her liking, and our side table was cluttered with her pills and knickknacks. Returning from the office felt like entering a stranger's domain. Patricia also began behaving as though her residency was ongoing. She opined on my food choices, faulted my dishwasher loading method, informed Jessica my television volume was excessive. When I highlighted her guest status, she countered that relatives shouldn't create feelings of exclusion. During the second week, I drew a firm line. Informed Jessica her mother must depart by the upcoming Sunday or I'd reach my limit. The unending company of an extra individual in our compact quarters was overwhelming me, and Patricia's demeanor worsened each day. Jessica requested extra time, asserting her mother was diligently searching but all options were overpriced or in unsafe districts. I recommended Patricia explore subsidized lodging or co-tenants, but Jessica deemed that impractical for a person of her mother's years. That weekend, Jessica and Patricia scouted rentals jointly. They returned reporting that all viewed units were either too costly, too cramped, or in zones Patricia deemed risky. Jessica appeared anxious and remorseful, and Patricia amplified her woe is me act. Monday dawn, I arose to Patricia preparing a meal in our cooking space at 6 a.m. When I questioned her early rise, she explained she was packing Jessica's midday meal for her job. As that's a maternal duty, I noted that Jessica is capable of preparing her own food. Patricia became protective, stating she was merely attempting to assist during her stay in our residence, that it's instinctive for her to nurture her child. I clarified she wasn't residing here. She was supposed to be locating her own dwelling. That's when she revealed the surprise. Stated Jessica had assured her she could remain indefinitely since kin support one another. That I ought to endorse my spouse's choice to aid her parent rather than being possessive about territory. I promptly phoned Jessica at her workplace to verify what she'd truly conveyed. Jessica confessed she'd permitted her mother an extended stay but insisted she believed I approved since I'd remained silent for 14 days. I refreshed her memory that I'd been probing about Patricia's exit daily, that we engaged in a massive dispute that evening. Jessica labeled me as unfeeling and lacking comprehension of familial devotion. I responded that I grasped family concepts but distinguished between brief aid and permitting indefinite residency without consultation. Patricia overheard the entire clash from the main area and interjected, claiming she hated causing issues but had no alternatives, that she'd exhausted all avenues and this was her sole recourse. Jessica began weeping and I recognized I was losing ground. The following day, I discovered Patricia rifling through our correspondence. When I demanded an explanation, she said she was checking for a shipment she'd directed there. I informed her she lacked authority to handle our mail and certainly shouldn't route deliveries to our address sans approval. She adopted a defiant tone, saying she was simply being practical and I was overreacting. That typical folks don't object to relatives assisting with minor chores like organizing letters. I declared she wasn't a relative. She was an overstaying visitor who'd exceeded her invitation. Jessica arrived to find us debating and instantly sided with her mother. Accused me of being harsh and irrational, and that Patricia was only attempting to contribute. I explained that examining another's mail uninvited isn't contributing. It's breaching confidentiality. That's when Jessica unleashed her own revelation. Declared perhaps Patricia should simply reside here ongoing since she evidently couldn't finance independent living. That we possessed the capacity and it would resolve all concerns. I gazed at her as if she'd gone mad. I informed Jessica no scenario existed where her mother would cohabitate indefinitely. That I'd never consented and refused to endure my mother-in-law forever. Jessica charged me with self-centeredness and asserted that wedded pairs compromise for relatives. The conflict intensified, with Jessica alleging I lacked concern for her or her kin. Claimed a decent spouse would desire to support his partner's parent during hardship. I countered that a decent partner wouldn't surprise her spouse with lasting visitors sans dialogue. Patricia lounged on the sofa throughout this quarrel, appearing satisfied as if relishing our discord. When Jessica wept, Patricia inserted herself, stating she never intended disruption, but occasionally kin must sacrifice for kin. I retired furious and awoke Thursday to discover Patricia had introduced additional items into our main space. Not merely personal effects but furnishings, as if establishing a lasting setup. When I queried the source, she mentioned an acquaintance had delivered them. That night, I conveyed to Jessica this had escalated excessively. Patricia was evidently intending permanent occupancy despite my protests, and our modest unit couldn't sustain 3 grown-ups long-term. Jessica replied her mother merely sought stability and comfort. Friday dawn, I descended to find Patricia restructuring our kitchen storage. She'd relocated our plates to alternate levels and revamped everything to her tastes. When I demanded what she was up to, she claimed she was enhancing the area's efficiency. I instructed her to restore all to original positions since this wasn't her domain. She asserted she was only aiding and that I should value input from someone skilled in proper arrangement. I responded I valued her departure. Jessica returned to witness me reverting everything while Patricia griped about my domineering nature. Jessica inquired about the incident, and Patricia portrayed it as if I'd assaulted her for attempting household contributions. That's when Jessica uttered words that altered the course. She met my gaze and declared, "Mom is residing here from now on. She lacks other options and this is how kin behave. If you can't accept that, perhaps you should seek alternate lodging." I was stunned by her words. My spouse of 3 years was basically selecting her scheming parent over me and directing me to exit my own residence. The residence I funded, the contract I endorsed, the spot I'd occupied for 2 years prior to Patricia's arrival, I observed both awaiting my concession and remorse. Patricia with her triumphant look as if she'd triumphed. Jessica with folded arms as if challenging further dispute. Both anticipating my surrender and acceptance of this absurd setup. Instead, I replied, agreed. Their expressions of astonishment were unforgettable. Jessica began retracting, claiming she hadn't intended it that way and we required rational discussion. Patricia appeared less victorious and more anxious, as if her scheme was derailing. I informed Jessica she'd expressed her preference plainly and I was honoring it. Proceeded upstairs and commenced gathering my attire and vital papers. Jessica trailed, imploring me to relax and converse logically. I stated no conversation was needed. Contacted my pal Mike, who possesses an extra chamber, and asked if I could temporarily stay. He affirmed yes and volunteered to assist with transporting my items. I told him I'd arrive shortly with necessities. As I packed, Jessica sobbed, questioning how I could forsake our union over a residency matter. I replied she'd already forsaken our union by preferring her mother to her spouse, that she'd demonstrated my position in her hierarchy. Patricia attempted sudden mediation, suggesting alternative resolutions, that she didn't aim to fracture our union and could intensify efforts for independent housing. Far too delayed, Madam. I completed packing and approached the exit. Jessica was in tears, inquiring my destination and return time. I stated I was heading to Mike's and would return the next day for remaining possessions. She pleaded against my departure, but I was finished. Passed the weekend at Mike's, contemplating subsequent actions. Reached my attorney Monday to explore separation processes and discovered intriguing details regarding our rental status as the lease was exclusively mine. I held the authority to conclude it with adequate warning. I also learned Jessica and Patricia would qualify as improper residents if I withdrew from the agreement. The owner could oust them promptly since they weren't listed and possessed no lawful claim to stay. Tuesday dawn, I revisited the unit during Jessica's work hours. Patricia was present, behaving as the household matriarch, viewing programs in her sleepwear. She attempted dialogue about reconciliation, but I disregarded her and collected further belongings. I observed she'd implemented additional modifications, repositioned furnishings, affixed artwork to surfaces, and generally conducted herself as proprietor. When I remarked, she claimed she was merely ensuring comfort since this was now her abode. That's when I opted for extreme measures, contacted the property administration, and sought premature contract closure citing unresolvable cohabitation shifts. Detailed that I was the only signer and would depart the premises after 30 days. They verified the penalty and noted they'd dispatch formal alert to the site. I also reached the services under my name and arranged cutoff for identical timing. Power and web were mine. Heating and television were Jessica's, so she'd manage those independently. That night, I returned for more items and informed Jessica of the contract end. She erupted, yelling I couldn't expel them. I recalled her directive to depart if displeased with the setup. Jessica implored reconsideration, stating her mother lacked alternatives and they needed extended period for solutions. I replied they had 30 days, exceeding Patricia's initial requirement for arrangements. Patricia interjected, accusing me of spitefulness and brutality for penalizing them over familial efforts. I responded she wasn't my kin and never would be, that she'd schemed into my residence and demolished my union accordingly. The ensuing weeks were turmoil. Jessica phoned relentlessly, beseeching reversal of the contract closure. Patricia reportedly devoted much time to weeping and portraying victimhood to listeners. Jessica's sibling even contacted to berate my callousness. I remained steadfast, secured a pleasant single bedroom near my workplace and signed a contract solely mine. Transferred all personal effects and furnishings I'd contributed to the partnership from the prior spot during their absences. Left them with Jessica's pieces and the 30-day alert. Jessica attempted all tactics to sway me. Vowed Patricia's departure upon my return. Claimed they'd located an apartment for her mother and merely required additional weeks. Proposed covering the closure penalties for reversal. I declared it overdue. The owner affirmed Jessica and Patricia's attempts to join the contract but failure to qualify sans me as main renter. They also couldn't sustain the rent on Jessica's earnings alone even if approved. The 30th day dawned, and the owner issued a directive to vacate within 72 hours. Absent new contract or tenancy proof, they had to exit. Jessica phoned in distress, claiming forced removal with no refuge. I reminded her Patricia was allegedly adept at securing spots hastily. Evidently, Patricia's associate circle vanished swiftly when needing enduring lodging over brief pity stops. Remarkable how many suddenly lacked room when she sought permanent storage for her items. Jessica temporarily relocated to her sibling, while Patricia joined her alternate offspring in another region. The union was clearly finished, and I engaged a separation attorney the subsequent week. The ordeal cost approximately $3,000 in premature closure charges and relocation fees, but each dollar justified escaping that ordeal. Jessica attempted to argue abandonment, but lawfully I'd provided correct alerts and adhered to all contract stipulations. Patricia evidently narrates to all ears that I'm a wicked individual who cast them homeless, conveniently omits her uninvited intrusion into my home and my spouse's preference for her over me. Astonishing how narratives shift when you're the narrator. Jessica's sibling continues dispatching hostile notes about demolishing their kin. But truthfully their kin was already disordered that I merely ceased facilitating it. Patricia nurtured a child who viewed surprising her spouse with enduring visitors as proper conduct. 2 months on, and I'm thriving in my fresh spot. Seeing a new person who views relocating parents sans consultation as absurd. Amusing how rational individuals grasp fundamental partnership limits. Jessica attempted mending fences months back, admitting errors and desiring reconciliation. I informed her the error was wedding someone ignorant that partners precede parents. That vessel had departed. My attorney confirmed the separation concluded last month. Jessica received no support payments since she opted to favor her mother over our union. She bore her own attorney costs as she triggered the split by directing my exit. The finest aspect is realizing Patricia's scheme imploded entirely. She believed she could connive into complimentary lodging and instead shattered her child's marriage. Now she's with her other progeny who evidently enforces firmer limits. Some believe my actions were excessive, but I differ. Jessica issued an ultimatum, and I accepted her challenge. She assumed I'd yield and embrace her desired setup, but discovered some resist manipulation. The contract closure was fully lawful, and I supplied adequate warning. If they desired continuance, they should have considered that prior to instructing the rent payer to depart. Choices yield outcomes, even unanticipated ones. Solo living is truly wonderful. No conflicts, no scheming, no unauthorized rearrangements. Merely tranquility in a domain genuinely mine. Occasionally, the optimal retaliation is simply distancing from poisonous individuals. Patricia discovered that toying with another's housing can rebound dramatically. Jessica discovered preferring parents to partners ruins unions. I discovered excising poisonous folks promptly enhances psychological well-being. Would I alter my approach in hindsight? Likely would have closed the contract during Patricia's first overstay week. Might have avoided much tension and conflict by acting earlier rather than attempting empathy. The entire ordeal instructed me to heed instincts regarding people and scenarios. When individuals reveal their true nature via behaviors, accepted initially. Don't await repeated demonstrations as I did. My fresh partner finds the entire tale comical. States any female prioritizing her parent over her spouse merits precisely what Jessica received. It's refreshing partnering with someone comprehending standard relationship emphases at last. Jessica remains with her sibling from latest reports, evidently struggling romantically since males avoid her familial chaos. Can't fathom why anyone would hesitate engaging that spectacle. The rental unit acquired fresh occupants within 30 days of our exit. Pleasant youthful duo who comprehend respecting contracts and limits. The owner expressed relief at dependable renters post our ordeal. Patricia sporadically attempts social media connections, which I dismiss and obstruct instantly. Certain individuals never grasp that severing ties yields lasting repercussions. She chose demolishing my union and now endures the fallout. Finest choice ever was escaping that poisonous dynamic rather than attempting to mend unmotivated individuals. Occasionally, the sole victorious strategy is abstaining from the contest altogether.